Chapter 4. Almost Love. April 1993, Velika Kladusha. Because there had been a slowdown in fighting, I was able to be at home more now. I continued to watch the beautiful Alma walk by our house each day, yet I felt it wouldn't be fair to act on my desires. She was too young, too vulnerable. However, we couldn't help but find ourselves in each other's lives. Because our home was one of the houses that still had electricity, we would often invite others to come over and watch movies. One night when Alma had joined the audience, the movie chosen turned out to be more frightening than expected. Alma had taken a seat next to me, and when I noticed her tears, her trembling, I instinctively put my arm around her. Alma didn't resist. Instead, she melted into my embrace and sat there, no longer quivering, pressed into my side for the rest of the film. After the credits rolled and the lights came on, Alma stood and smiled at me, but she left right away with her sister, Amela. I didn't see her again until a few days later when I ran into her and a friend at Galleria, a popular bar. We chatted for a bit, smiling and flirting with each other. "It's a gorgeous day," I said. "I was thinking about taking a hike up to the old city castle." This castle, built by Turks 500 years ago, was a favorite tourist spot with a museum and a restaurant. Alma looked at her friend, who shrugged and nodded. "Okay," said Alma. "Sounds fun." The castle had been undergoing the process of restoration, but that had all stopped when the war began. As we hiked up the trail, we paused to admire the view. From the summit, we looked out, over all of Velika Kladusha, and across to the mountain to the south of the city, so green and vibrant. Because the earth was still damp from rain the night before, I found a piece of dry wood and set it down for us. But when I sat down, her friend sat next to me. Perhaps they planned this, for Alma sat on the tops of my feet. I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around her shoulders, holding her safe against me. In that moment, I imagined her as mine, but I knew I was not yet good enough for her, and we both still had relationships with our own significant others. No, the time was not yet right. A couple of days after our hike, I met the girl I was currently seeing to have a drink. When she slid onto the stool next to me, she fixed me with a frosty glare. She said very little until the bartender brought her rum and coke. She took a long drink, then turned to me. "I heard you were seen with Alma the other day," she said, a challenge in her voice. "No," I lied. "Not me." I'm not sure why I denied it. I guess I knew that getting together with Alma was a long shot, and certainly wouldn't happen anytime soon. She took another gulp from her drink, then smacked the glass hard on the counter. "You know what, Mettco? You don't have a chance with Alma anyway." I looked into her eyes and saw only envy and hatred. I called over the bartender, paid for her drink, and left, and I went back to the one-night women. The high school senior prom took place in late May. Because there were extra tickets, some friends and I attended. It was not unusual for past students to return to the prom to see old friends and even teachers. It was more of a great big party for the local kids rather than a formal event. After milling around for a bit, I spied Alma sitting at a table by herself. I casually walked over and sat down next to her. She looked radiant in a full-skirted knee-length dress with white polka dots. She sighed and swiped back a few stray curls from her face. "Why are you sitting all alone?" I asked. "Where's your boyfriend?" "Asim?" "Oh, I don't know." She seemed almost uninterested. "I haven't seen him in a while." She lifted those smiling eyes to me and tipped her head. "Do you like bingo?" "Bingo?" "Yeah, bingo. Come on." Alma stood quickly and grabbed my hand, and we hurried into the adjoining room. We bought several cards and sat down to play. Alma carefully marked each number as they were announced. I didn't pay much attention to the game. My eyes were on Alma. Suddenly she jumped up. "Mettco, look," she cried, pointing to one of her cards. "I think we've got bingo." She waved her hand in the air. Bingo. After they had verified that she had won, Alma nudged me in the ribs. "Go on and get the prize, Mettco." But I shook my head. As those around us clapped, I shoved her forward. "No, you go get it." With a flourish, she walked to the front and accepted the prize, a green child's bathrobe. When she carried it back to the table, we both just stared at it and began laughing. Was this a sign or some strange joke? The thought of having a child with Alma unsettled me, and I could tell Alma felt self-conscious too. I thought of her often, dreamt of a possible future together. But did Alma ever think of me? "Alma, stay for a while." Her eyes met mine, so innocent and doe-like. She pulled the door shut. I leaned forward, and for the first time I kissed her. In June, Alma's sister celebrated her birthday at a party held for her at the local cafe bar, Mornar. I had received an invitation and made sure I arrived before the other partiers. When Alma came in, I asked if I could buy her a drink before the festivities got started. We sat outside on the terrace sipping coffee, talking and laughing. It was almost like a first date. Alma looked both beautiful and vulnerable in white leggings, shorts, and a loose white shirt. We stayed for most of the party. As it started to wind down, I put my lips next to her ear. "I will walk you home," I whispered. Behind Mornar, on a hill between our two houses, a great oak tree stood. If you stand at just the right place beside the large trunk, no one can see you from any direction. I took Alma to the tree, and there I kissed her again. In my heart, I was beginning to fall in love with this woman, but I could not tell her. I knew my saying so would frighten her. My strong feelings frightened me. We were not ready. I buried myself in the black market again. I started gambling. I did not seek out Alma, but spent time with the one-night women. I didn't want Alma to see the life I led, so I kept my distance. Alma was nothing like the women I had known. Although I yearned for her, I did not feel I could pursue her. Sometimes I would see her walking in town with her boyfriend, and jealousy would fill my soul. I wanted nothing more than to beat him up and take Alma for my own. But of course I did not. I remained in the shadows, burning with my own desires, but never acting on them. I knew my staying away from Alma was best for her, and so I saw her infrequently, only when our paths happened to cross. But the more I avoided her, the more she consumed my thoughts. And then one late afternoon, as I was driving back to our house, I saw Alma walking just ahead. Instead of driving by and just giving a quick wave, I pulled up alongside her. "Alma, let me give you a ride home," I said. "It's nearing dusk, and it would be safer for you to be in a car than on the street." With a grateful smile, Alma slid into the passenger seat, and we took off. But before we reached her house, I purposefully took a wrong turn. "Where are we going?" she asked, a look of alarm on her face. I laughed easily, casually. "Alma, I am going to take you to the border and sell you." She smiled this, but as we drove further from her home, I could see her growing more tense. I drove all the way to the hill where we had first hiked, where she had sat on my shoes, and I had wished she were mine. I brought the car to a stop, then turned to Alma and took her in my arms. I kissed her again and again and again until she finally pushed me away. "Mettco, stop," she whispered between gasps. But I could not stop. My hands were in her hair, and I shook with the pent-up emotion I had kept contained within me the last several weeks. "Please, Alma." I kissed her again, felt her warming to my touch, but then her hand was on my chest, firmly pressing me away. It did not matter how much I begged or pleaded. Alma would let me do no more than kiss her. Angered by this rejection, I pulled away and sat fuming on my side of the car. I reached up to open the sunroof, sliding it back in one motion. All the rainwater that had collected on the top of the car poured down on me, drenching my pants. Sputtering, I looked over at Alma, who had covered her mouth to stifle her laugh. But I saw the amusement in her eyes, which added fuel to my fire. I started the car and sped all the way back to her house, not saying a word. When we pulled up in front, I reached across to her to open the passenger door and nodded to her to get out. She managed to do so with some dignity. Before she closed the door, she leaned in slightly. "Good night, Mettco," she said in that voice I love to hear. I had a very unusual time. Then with a giggle she slammed the door. Anger, rejection, disappointment suffused my body. How could she treat me like that? But a small thought fought its way to my rage. Alma was a girl who deserved my respect. Early one day in December, I returned home after 5 days of the worst fighting I had seen yet. Our men had been tasked with crossing a river in freezing temperatures and taking back a large portion of territory from the enemy. A lot of blood was shed, but I helped many men survive. In the end, the troops gained the ground they wanted, and we were rewarded by being released home for 3 days. When I walked into our house that night, I found my cousin sitting with Samir. He told me my mom was at the neighbor's house. The parents were gone for a few days, and they had left their 2 teenage daughters at home. Mom had gone over to check on them, make sure they had a good dinner, and see if they needed anything else. I called over to let her know I was home and heard the laughing voices of females in the background. "Who is there with you, Mom?" "Oh." Her hand muffled the receiver for a moment. "It's just Alma and Amla. Do you need me? Should I come home?" No, I'll be right over." I dashed into the shower, elated at the thought of seeing my beautiful friend again. I had missed her deeply. Everyone sat around at the house drinking coffee and talking until late in the evening. And then, somehow, Alma and I found ourselves alone. Alma got a deck of cards and asked whether I'd like to play a card game. "Sure," I said, happy to have an excuse to remain with her. "And how is that boyfriend of yours?" Alma tossed her black hair over one shoulder and shuffled the cards. "Forget him, he's gone." It turned out Asim had actually joined the army against which I was now fighting. He was my enemy in more ways than one. I took a deep breath and reached for Alma's hand, guiding it to my heart. "Alma, I have wanted to ask you this for a long time, but I just didn't know how." I stopped, the word stuck in my throat. Alma, would you ever want to be my girlfriend?" A smile lighted on her lips, and I bent my head to capture it. She laughed and snuggled close to me, her eyes saying all the time that she loved me too. I had been a fool. I hadn't wanted to spend time pursuing Alma because she wouldn't give herself to me physically. But now I saw the truth. I want only her, and it appeared she wanted me too. It was almost 3 in the morning when I walked her home. Late by most standards, but not unusual during war. You had to grab snippets of time with the people you cared about whenever you could. Snow blanketed the ground. I held onto Alma's hand tightly as we made our way through the large drifts near her house. At the doorway we paused to kiss again. Her breath steamed the air, her look warmed my heart. I will never forget how she looked that night. Her long curly black hair hanging down below her shoulders, those hypnotic blue eyes that held my gaze. If I had known that the next afternoon I would be called back to the front lines, I would have never left her that night. As I walked away, I turned back 3 times to wave or to look at her again. The last time I turned, she was pulling the front door closed behind her. That picture lives forever in my mind. Chapter 5. Ibrahim. December 20th, 1993. Just outside Velika Kladusha, I crouched in the quiet with 600 other camouflage soldiers waiting. Nervousness made me glance down at my watch, although I had checked it countless times before. 4:48 a.m. We were behind enemy lines across the long snowy meadow that populated the edge of the tree line. What am I doing here? Further down the lines, a man rose from the ranks and moved about the others. With a surge of pleasure, I recognized my friend. Hey, Ibro! I called, my breath rising and falling with the words as they pierced the stillness of the morning. The man, middle-aged but fit, lifted his head at the sound of his name. Seeing me, he crept over. The rain that had fallen all night had filled the ground thick with Bosnian mud, which sucked unmercifully at his boots. Ahead, in the pre-dawn darkness, the earth rolled up. Few of us needed daylight to know what awaited us at the top of the hill ahead. This would be the fourth time our ragtag militia would attempt to take this Bosnian National Army bunker. Ibrahim Kantarevic and I were both from Velika Kladusha, but we first met as soldiers in the Bosnian National Army, where we quickly became friends. I looked up to Ibrahim as I would an older brother, a role I think he enjoyed fulfilling. When Bosnia fell to war within itself and the National Army began to advance on our hometown, we both joined the Western Bosnian Army to protect our families and fight within the ranks of the local militia. Civil war brought with it chaos, confusion, turmoil. The very men I had fought beside just weeks before were now my enemies. But such was the way of those turbulent times. Ask 10 different men why they fought, and you were liable to get as many answers. Religion, politics, land, unity, independence, survival, ethnicity, each person had his own reason. Ibrahim and I had ours, to protect our family, our home. Though I was only 22, I possessed a demeanor and look that made me seem much older. Just when I should have been entering the fullness of my life, the war intervened and hardened me. Ibrahim was different. He continued to carry with him an air of compassion. Because he was older, he possessed a maturity I did not. Time and experience had taught him how to battle the enemy yet still retain his humanity. On that morning, Ibrahim and I whispered back and forth for a time before a radio nearby crackled to life. The voice hushed. Zone 2, begin your ascent. Zone 2, begin ascent. Ibrahim winked at me and gave me a slap on my shoulder. He bolted forward, gun in hand. Like ants, the men quietly wove and dodged their way up the ridge. This was Masankari, a great hill fortress that remained under enemy control. We planned to take it back by force. In my mind, I ran through the layout of the territory. Halfway up the road leading to the top, several abandoned homes and barns dotted in the landscape. Our mission was to take possession of these buildings. We had received intelligence that enemy soldiers occupied one particular house and would be waiting there to ambush us, but we would not take the road. Instead, we would come up from behind through the trees and hope to surprise them. As platoon approached the cluster of houses in the early morning light, I suddenly heard orders shouted out. Gunfire peppered the buildings with holes. Someone blasted around and kicked down the door of the suspected house. Enemy troops fired from the upper windows or ran out the back, scrambling to safety. In this new war, everyone looked the same, all dressed in the generic Bosnian army uniform. Only the color of the armband we wore signified which side we fought for. But even that could be deceptive, for everyone carried a band, just like the opposition's in their pocket, ready to switch them at the moment's notice. No one could be trusted. Wounded at Zone 3. I could barely hear the radio above the gunfire and the shouts from the hill. Zone 3 head wounded, send medic. The radio man and I exchanged glances. I could see my comrades still battling to take the houses. Some of them had reached the tree line further up. Bullets continued to bite at the dirt from the enemy bunker above. I took a deep breath. As a medic, I had to stop thinking and just run. There were wounded men up there who needed me, who needed the life I carried in my pack. I tightened the grip on my weapon and launched myself beyond the protection of the trees. The first man I reached lay on his side, grunting. Blood seeped from his arm and stained his sleeve. Shots glanced along my shoulder. The sounds of the battlefield drained away as my training took over. I silently examined and cleaned the wound with the quick precision I'd acquired helping hundreds of such wounded soldiers. The man winced slightly as I wrapped the bandaging but said nothing. There were others. A man with shrapnel in his back lay face down, crying. Someone had been pushed out the second-floor window of a barn and suffered a broken leg. Still others I could not save. A soldier I vaguely recognized grabbed my arm as I bent over another of the wounded. There's a man on the far side of that house who needs help, shot by a sniper, I think. I nodded my head in thanks, but the soldier had already disappeared. I finished sewing up the cut in front of me and patted the man on the back. Then I rose and hurried toward the corner of the house the soldier had indicated. I passed one man crumpled on the ground, moaning in his pain and grief. One look told me the man was dying, so I kept on going. In this way, I differed from most medics. The others would hold the hands of fatally wounded men, give comfort, tell them what they wanted to hear. Not I. When I came upon a soldier I knew was lost, I did not stop. I had long ago made the decision not to squander precious time on those whom I could not save. I kept my emotions in check and went about my work in an efficient, almost business-like manner. This was the only way I knew how to deal with the constant horror of human suffering I encountered. When I reached the corner of the house, I crouched down and looked into the open space just beyond. I could see the injured man about 10 yards away. Just a boy, really. Under the blood, his face was white with fear and bewildered innocence. Our gazes met, and I felt a surge of momentary compassion. I had looked like that once. "Where are you wounded?" I called out. The boy gave no answer but continued to breathe heavily and stare back glassy-eyed. I leaned back against the protection of the wall. If he had been wounded by a sniper, there was no telling where the shot had come from or if it were safe for me to go to him. I'd be taking the gamble. From what I could see, the wound didn't appear too serious and would probably be a quick fix. I guess the boy was more scared than anything. I waited several minutes to see if any other shots rang out. None did. Finally, I stood and sprinted to where the soldier lay. I squatted down and reached for my bag, pulled out some gauze, and wiped the blood away from the wound. "What's your name, soldier?" "F. Farid, sir." I surveyed the wound and confirmed what I had thought, a superficial slice on the boy's neck. Good. A few quick stitches, and then I dragged him back behind the house. I didn't want to stay in such a vulnerable position any longer than I had to. "Okay, I'm going to sew you up," and then the crack of a rifle shot ripped the air. Like a flame blown out, the scene before me disappeared. I fell over into the muck. Wet heat slid down my neck. I felt as though the entire left side of my face was gone. I could not see. I heard Farid curse and fumble about, probably looking for his weapon. As I raised my hands to my face, a second shot split the silence, followed by a thud. I could only guess the sniper's bullet had found Farid. With shaking, sticky fingers, I blindly reached out around me to locate the bandage roll that had fallen from my fingers. I found it lying near my feet and snatched it, unraveling the gauze and winding it around my head. I remained on the ground, hoping to stay under the gunfire that resounded from every side. I lay in the middle of a deadly firefight. I knew I could just as easily be killed by friendly fire as I could by an enemy bullet. After several minutes, the shots ceased. Then came the sound of someone approaching, which filled me with cold fear. How was I to tell friend from foe? I grabbed blindly at the dirt for my weapon, but it was nowhere near. A hand fell heavily on my shoulder, sending a convulsion through my body. Shh, it's all right. Someone will come for you soon. I reached out to clasp onto this fellow soldier, but he was already gone, running back into battle, no doubt taking my medic pack and weapon with him. I heard yelling and more shots closer now. I knew this meant the our side was retreating and that eventually I would be left behind in enemy territory. I struggled to replay those last moments of conscious sight, hoping to discover something, anything that would help me. I vaguely remembered there being some dense foliage several yards behind where the injured man had lain, where I myself now lay. I rolled over and slithered on my belly, my extended hands pulling me forward in what I hoped was the right direction, until I felt the swish of branches on my back. They were still damp from the previous night's rain. I huddled under the bushes, breathing hard from the effort. Maybe I am not really wounded. Maybe this is just shock. I had seen many soldiers who suffered the symptoms of an injury brought on by nothing more than paranoia and fear. I slowly brought my hand to my face again. The moist bandage did not allow me to deceive myself. Several minutes went by. Lightheadedness dimmed my senses, and although I knew there was fighting all around me, the sounds of battle seemed to fade. Hold on, just hold on. I started to cough and choke. The inside of my throat felt slick, coated with something thick and tasting of copper. Blood. No amount of coughing stopped the steady trickle. Was the sniper still there, willing me to die, ready to move in for the killing blow? The thought made my heart pound, further pooling my lungs with blood. Sabic. The intensity of the sounds around me surged back. Ibrahim. My voice came out in a gurgle of warmth. Here! I heard the rustle of plants and then felt a strong hand on my arm. Tender fingers examined the bandaging and secured it in place. Can you walk? A bullet zipped through the plants next to us, and Ibrahim hoisted me up. We're getting out of here. I don't think I could. The pain pounding in my head made my senses swim, but Ibrahim didn't let up, not until we had reached the safety of the side of the house. Our troops were falling back, and if we didn't move fast, we'd soon be behind enemy lines. Ibrahim took my hand. We can't make it out there if we walk or run. Too much crossfire. We're gonna have to crawl. Now I want you to go behind me and hold on to my boots. You got that? Just hold on to my boots. My head wobbled in agreement. We started our crawl over the open ground, using knees and elbows to push forward. I kept my hands tight on Ibrahim's boots, their strings laced between my fingers. The echoes of footsteps and shooting, screaming, and explosions came from all around us. I shut out everything but what Ibrahim had told me. The whole world for me came down to holding on to my friend's boots. When Ibrahim moved, I moved. When Ibrahim paused, I paused. We crawled through mud and blood, over dead bodies and discarded weapons for what seemed like hours, until at last my strength ran out. I had no idea how far we had come or how much farther we had to go. I knew only that I had lost a lot of blood and had nothing left to give. My hands dropped from Ibrahim's boots. Ibro, my fingers won't hold on anymore. Ibrahim stopped but said nothing for a long time. I'm sure he must have been looking back at me, taking in what must have been a pitiable sight. I lay in the mud, bleeding and exhausted. Without the strength to raise my own head, Ibrahim cursed and crawled to my side, slipping one arm through my belt. I tried to help by pushing with my feet and pulling with my fingertips as Ibrahim crawled on his side, pulling me along, but unconsciousness steeped in my mind like a strong cup of coffee. I was slowing down, my friend, and I knew it. Ibro, I murmured. Ibro. The pulling stopped, and I felt Ibrahim release his grip on the belt. A soft rain had begun to fall. For the first time I felt no pain. Ibrahim's hands clamped down on mine in a circulation-cutting grip. Then he scooted backward on his butt, inch by inch, dragging me with him. I drifted in and out of consciousness until we finally came to a stop. Evidently, we had reached the edge of the forest where the rest of our troops had taken cover. We were safe, for now. Sometime later, Ibrahim helped lift me into the ambulance. Ibrahim, I can't see, I said, not wanting to let go of him. Shh, don't worry. They will fix you up at the hospital, he reassured. Then with a squeeze of my hand, he let go. The sniper who had shot me had claimed 7 soldiers that day. One of them happened to catch a glimpse of a man in a broken attic window before the bullet hit his shoulder. The wounded soldier promptly propped himself upright where he was, set his weapon between his knees, aimed, and waited. When next the sniper raised his head, the soldier pulled the trigger and shot him through the throat. 2 months later, on February 16, 1994, Ibrahim attempted to pull another wounded man back to safety. He was overtaken by enemy soldiers, dragged into one of the nearby houses, and shot in the head with a pistol. It was the 5th and last time the Western Bosnian Army attempted to take Masankari. Chapter 6. Descent into Darkness. December 21st, 1993. Rebro Hospital, Croatia. I awoke to darkness. The faint echo of songs, Christmas songs, filtered into my head. Other sounds too. A distant cacophony of heavy coughing followed by the patter of hurried footsteps. Nearby I heard something odd, a scratching of some sort. I felt myself jerk involuntarily, afraid at what I could not see. Suddenly the scratching stopped and I heard footsteps coming toward me. Mettco, can you hear me? Someone was there, someone who knew my name. I did not answer until I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. Even though this sent a little dart of pain through my neck and head, the touch was kind. I slowly nodded. Mettco, it's your Aunt Adela. Today is December 21st, 1993. You are at Rebro Hospital. Do you understand? Aunt Adela. What? Shh. Don't rouse yourself. Stay quiet. I'll tell them you're finally awake. Oh, nurse, nurse. I heard her voice fade away. I lifted my hands and with my fingertips traced the thick layers of bandages that encircled my head. Vague bits of memory surfaced, shouting, the sound of bullets, the wet ground, wet face, wet boots. Footsteps announced the presence of several people. I felt a woman's hand take my pulse. Then she spoke to me, her voice oddly dispassionate. Mettco, my name is Irina, your day nurse, and Dr. Katusic, who operated on you, is also here. A warm hand firmly gripped mine for a moment, then let go. I heard what sounded like a shuffling of papers. Well, Mettco, it's good to see you responding so soon. We've taken the x-rays and had them examined. We've done some repair work and I think you'll heal up just fine. Hands slowly removed my bandages and fingers gently lifted first one eyelid, then the other. A soothing liquid dripped into each eye in turn, dribbling down my face. I could hear the steady beat of my own heart. Taking a deep breath, I tried to focus on what I saw, but I saw nothing. I think he's ready for the new dressing, said the doctor. As the nurse began wrapping my head with fresh bandages, I could hear Dr. Katusic speaking to someone else, saying that everything looked good and all was going well. Doctor, I stammered weakly. The conversation stopped. What happened? You've suffered a major trauma to your skull. Both eyes were severely damaged in the process. You will suffer from swelling and bleeding for several weeks, but once the worst has passed, my colleagues and I think you will make a marvelous recovery. A strange silence followed this prognosis. I turned my freshly bandaged head toward the sound of the voices. No. Ibrahim, what happened? To Ibrahim? Ibrahim? The doctor repeated as though unsure of what I asked him. No, Ibrahim was brought in for treatment. A pause. Mettco, perhaps I should clarify your situation. You have lost vision in both of your eyes. We found a bullet lodged in your left eye crevice. It entered through the right eye crevice and did the most damage there. You are blind, but other than that, you have escaped with relatively little damage done. I said nothing to this, unsure how to react. None of this seemed real. Blind? How could that be? Will surgery help? When he gave his answer, I could tell by his voice that Dr. Katusic had already begun to move on. Probably not. What the doctor did not tell me that day was that I had been in surgery for nearly 3 hours, teetering between life and death, that my right eye had exploded like an apple pierced to the core, that whoever had found me on the ground had most likely seen my left eye lying nearby. No, these horrors I would learn much later. Okay, Mettco, time to change those bandages. I could tell by the voice and briskly efficient tone that I had a new nurse. I could feel her probing fingers as she pried away the soft material. My face, still swollen and bruised, throbbed, and I pulled away. Come now, Mettco, let's not make this difficult. Her patient, patronizing tone annoyed me. It had been a week since I had been able to eat, and my nerves were on edge. I did not want to cooperate. Get away from me! I shrieked. Like some crazed, half-starved animal, I lunged out of bed, pulling the IV behind me. The sound of the invisible swinging metal, hooks and squeaking wheels only infuriated me more. I yanked the IV feed out of my hand and stumbled forward into an unseen counter, then caromed into a mirror. A buzzer sounded, followed by the nurse's still calm voice. Get Dr. Katusic, please, right away. For some reason, I hated that I couldn't rattle the nurse with my rude behavior. My frustration and anger exploded. Footsteps hurried into the room as I slammed both fists into the mirror again and again. A roaring wail of misery bled from my lips as I slumped to the floor amongst the broken shards of glass. Then there were hands grabbing me and pushing me every which way at once. Let me go, I snarled, writhing in their grasp. But they did not let go, instead pushing me down onto the bed. Fabric bit into both wrists and ankles as they bound me. Everything will be okay. You are fine. Dr. Katusic's voice was smooth as he slipped the needle beneath my skin. I continued to tremble under the firm hold of strangers until all the sounds faded away. For the next few days, my aunt came to visit me every day. A kind woman, she would sit and tell me stories to keep my mind occupied and my spirits up. Then, the day after Christmas, I awoke the familiar sound of my mother's voice. Mettco, can you hear me? Without thinking, I raised my arm, and the unmistakable warm, pudgy hand of my mother clasped onto my sleeve. The quiver of excitement that ran through her body suffused mine, and I suddenly came alive. He's moving a little, she cried. The answering voice came from the cold woman who was my nurse. Yes, he's still on medication to keep him calm, but that should finish in a few days. I felt a dent on the side of my bed and assumed my mother had leaned her bulky frame onto the cot. I heard a long, melancholy sigh. "Oh, Mettco, what have you gone through? We're all so frightened when we heard the news." I tried to mumble something from under my bandages, but my mother just kept going on, and I know she did not hear me. I tried waving my hand to stop her flow of words, but that just made her speak more quickly. I know, Harsh, you're worried about Samir, so like you." Her hand softly stroked my hair. "But Damir is there with him, and I have asked Alma to check on them both. So don't worry, Mettco. I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with your Aunt Adila so I can be here every day during visiting hours. I wish they let me cook so I could..." I dropped my hand, resigned to her ramblings. What I wanted to ask my mother about was Alma, knowing that she would look after Samir with all her gentle devotion while I lay confined in the hospital and with sterile, emotionless nurses as my caregivers, sparked a bit of jealousy. "You know what I'm gonna go get you?" My mother leaned close to the ear that was not wrapped in gauze. "I know you still can't have solids, so I'm gonna go buy you some chocolate-covered peanuts. That way you can suck the chocolate off and spit the peanuts back, no harm done. Consider it a Christmas treat." She gave me a final pat on the arm and then shuffled out of the room. A half an hour later, with what I can only guess was the begrudging approval of the hospital staff, she pressed a bowl full of chocolate-covered peanuts into my hand. "There, Mettco, just spit the peanuts back into the bowl." A little later, she left to visit some other relatives of ours. "Don't worry," she said, "I'll be gone only an hour or so." I wanted to tell her that a minute, an hour, a day, it was all the same to me. She would miss nothing. That evening, as a new nurse read to me, I heard her hand sifting through the nuts, followed by soft crunching. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not long after, the hospital staff finally permitted my mother to take me home. Dr. Katušić did not think it wise to withdraw from the 24/7 hospital care so soon, but I refused to stay any longer. An agreement was arranged with a hospital in Velika Kladusha. Every day, someone from the hospital's home care service would visit me to apply the eye drops and shots until I received a clean bill of health. The day before I was to leave the hospital in Rebro, I made a motion to my mother. "I want to have something to give to her," I said. My mother understood immediately. Later that afternoon, she folded my hands around a huge heart-shaped box. "Chocolates," she whispered, "wrapped in red foil, very pretty, very expensive." I guessed it to be about a 5-pound box. I smiled. "Mom, you're the best." When the ambulance pulled into our driveway, I could hear Samir's jubilant yell through the screen door. "He's here! Damir! Mettco's home!" The attendants lifted, let me out of the ambulance, and wheeled me toward the house on a gurney. The creak of the door was followed by the tread of footsteps on the front porch. "He doesn't look so good," said Damir. "Shush!" admonished Asima. "He's sedated. The doctor gave him some drugs to make the ride home easier for him." I felt myself being carried into the house and up the little ramp that led to my room, where they carefully laid me on my bed. Almost immediately, I heard the nearly silent tread of the wheels on Samir's chair. "Hi, Mettco," he said softly. "I'm so glad you're home." I wanted to say something to Samir, tell him I'd missed him, but talking just seemed like too much work at the moment. Mom said it for me. "Me too," agreed my mom. "We'll let him rest for a while." The wheels and her footsteps faded into the other room, but not before I heard her ask, "So, Samir, did Damir take good care of you while I was gone?" "Of course, Mom," said Samir, but there was laughter in his voice. I didn't wake up fully until much later, still a little groggy from the medication. The recognizable sounds of our house surrounded me. the buzz of the TV downstairs that my mom would watch until she fell asleep, the gentle creaking of our older house. Even the sheets and comforter on the bed were full of familiarity. I couldn't be sure, but I guessed it was late. My stomach gurgled hungrily. "Hi, Mettco, I'm here with you." I jumped involuntarily. I had thought I was alone. "Samir?" "Yes." I pushed myself up until I was propped against the wooden headboard. "Where are you?" "On your left, next to your bed." I stretched out my hand and felt the bars of the wheelchair very close by. "How are you feeling?" "Very sore and tired." I turned my bandaged head toward my brother. "What time is it?" "I think it's past 9. Neither of us spoke for a minute or two. "Have you seen Alma?" "No." My stomach gave a loud growl. "Mother left some soup here for you if you're hungry." I reached out timidly, afraid of knocking something over. More to the right, back by the lamp. There, right there. I found the bowl and lifted it to my lips, slowly slurping from the rim. Cold soup dripped onto the sheets, but I didn't care. I felt numb. I knew Samir must be watching me. He alone in our family could understand my sense of helplessness. I slid the empty bowl onto the nightstand. "When are you going to bed?" "Oh, I am going to be in here with you. Mom thought it would be good for someone to keep an eye on you through the night for the next week or so. And Damir, well, we can rely on him." I did know. Damir had never been one to help Samir, so why should he act any differently now that his older brother was wounded? "Thank you for staying with me, Samir," I said. "You are a kinder brother than Damir, or me for that matter." Samir gave a small laugh. "Yeah, I remember the days when you and Damir weren't all that great to me. But these last couple of years, at least you have spent more time with me." "I guess I just grew up," I said. Though we had never openly discussed the topic, Damir and I had always been jealous of the attention young Samir received from our mother. We didn't realize that our bullying pushed Asima into wanting to give even more of her time and care to Samir. And now I'm just like him. "Mother says that you're going to have lots of visitors tomorrow. Maybe Alma will be one of them." "Maybe." I slid down into the bed and pulled up the covers. "I think I'm going to go back to sleep. Good night, Samir." That night, I dreamed that I sat in a wheelchair. Blackbirds poured out of my eyes and flew up into the sky. There were people all around shouting at me. Outside the crowd, Samir stood with his hands in his pockets, shaking his head. Over the next few days, neighbors and family members filed in and out of my bedroom. I tried to act normal, to smile and accept hugs, but everyone spoke differently to me now. They acted as though they were trying very hard not to say the wrong thing to me, and even though I wore bandages across my eyes, I could still feel their stares. Worse was the pity that dripped from the voices of well-meaning friends. It seemed as though I were drowning in it. The snatches of discouraging conversation I caught cut deeply. They must have thought I couldn't hear what they said when they weren't speaking directly to me, but I could. I could hear it all. People came and went. Once cousin Beidou had come to stay with us for a while. He had been a medic in World War II, which is one reason why the hospital discharged me. He would be qualified to administer medication and first aid if I needed it. But even with all the attention, I felt apart from everyone. The nights were especially long and lonely. Eventually, Samir moved back to his room. While others rested, doubts haunted me in that double darkness. I was alone the night I started to gag. By the time Mom and Beidou got to my room, I had already lost a lot of blood and was on the verge of passing out. Pressure from my wounds had given way to more bleeding, which drained out my nose and eye crevices. then down into my throat. The doctor had warned this might happen and had sent home special shots to be given to me if needed. Vaido quickly administered the dose and wiped out my mouth with a wet rag. I knew the bandages over my eyes were soaked in red. My God, Mettco, we must take you back to that hospital. I couldn't quite speak, so I weakly shook my head. The room went quiet, and I knew my mother was torn between caring for her son and respecting my wishes. Cousin Vaido, always a calm man, broke the silence. I will stay with him through the night. All right, Vaido, my mother said with a sigh, and with that she shuffled out of my room. Over the next couple of hours, Vaido kept a close watch on me, dabbing blood away when needed and wiping my skin with a cool cloth. Around 5, Mom came back in saying that she hadn't been able to sleep, so she'd made a big breakfast instead. Can you sit up, Mettco? I've got a tray here for you, bacon, eggs, toast and jam, some juice and fresh fruit. I ate heartily for the first time in days, then suffered through a sponge bath from Cousin Vaido. But I'm glad I did. For a few hours later, my mother announced someone had come to see me, the one visitor I'd been hoping for. The morning light, soft footsteps entered my bedroom. I held my breath as Alma came closer. I felt her weight as she sat on the edge of the bed. There were no questions, just a hand that gingerly rested on the bandages covering my face. I could have cried when she spoke. Hello, Mettco. I haven't seen you in a long time. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. New parts are coming soon, and if you're subscribed, you'll get a notification the moment they're out, so you never miss a chapter.